Jackass bird. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, genders of all ages. Greetings, salutations. I'm going to pop on here and read a bedtime story tonight for you all. Get situated here. I give a bird to shut the fuck up. He usually doesn't. Not when I want him to, anyway. He's a jackass then. Generally. So tonight I'm going to be reading A Fowl Witch by Ambrose Bierce. This guy right here. Ambrose Bierce is an interesting guy. He disappeared. He was a pretty prolific writer, journalist. And he just all of a sudden up and disappeared from what I've read. Some interesting shit. I'd never read anything of his before I picked up this book and started reading this stuff on here. And I am really liking his stuff. So I'm hoping I continue to enjoy it. And so do you. For those of you that are playing the at-home game, I'm doing a little bit of Sour Banana Larry Luminosa this evening. If you want to, play along at home like a Bob Ross painting. That's the only color I got to fucking give you, though. That's it. You don't get anything else. So, A Fowl Witch by Ambrose Bierce. Frau Gaubenschlosser, yeah, I think that's the name, was strongly suspected of witchcraft. I don't think she was a witch, but would not like to swear she was not. In a court of law, unless a good deal depended upon my testimony, and I had been properly suborned beforehand. A great many persons accused of witchcraft have themselves stoutly disbelieved the charge, until, when subjected to shooting with a silver bullet or boiling in oil, they have found themselves unable to endure the test. And it must be confessed, appearances were against the Frau. In the first place, she lived quite alone in a forest and had no visiting list. This was suspicious. Secondly, and it was thus, mainly, that she had acquired her evil repute. All the barnyard fowls in the vicinity seemed to bear her the most uncompromising ill will. Whenever she passed a flock of hens or ducks or turkeys or geese, one of them with dropped wings, extended neck, and open bill would start in hot pursuit. Sometimes the whole flock would join in for a few moments with shrill clamor, but there would always be one fleeter and more determined than the rest, and that one would keep up the chase with unflagging zeal clean out of sight. Upon these occasions, the dame's fright was painful to behold. She would not scream. Her organs of screech seemed to have lost their power, nor, as a rule, would she curse. She would just address herself to silent, prayerful speed with every symptom of abject terror. The Frau's explanation of this unnatural persecution was singularly weak. Upon a certain night long ago, said she, a poor, bedraggled, and attenuated gander had applied at her door for relief. He stated in piteous accents that he had eaten nothing for months but tin tacks and an occasional beer bottle, and he had not roosted under cover for so long a time, he did not know what it was like. Would she give him a place on her fender and fetch out 6 or 8 cold pies to amuse him while she was preparing his supper? To this plea she turned a deaf ear, and he went away. He came again the next night, however, bringing a written certificate from a clergyman that his case was a deserving one. She would not aid him, and he departed. The night after, he presented himself again, with a paper signed by the relieving officer of the parish, stating that the necessity for help was most urgent. By this time, the Frau's good nature was quite exhausted. She slew him, dressed him, put him in a pot, and boiled him. She kept him boiling for 3 or 4 days, but she did not eat him because her teeth were just like anybody's teeth, no weaker perhaps, but certainly no stronger nor sharper. So she fed him to a threshing machine of her acquaintance, which managed to masticate some of the more modern portions, but was hopelessly wrecked upon the neck. From that time the poor beldame had lived under the ban of a great curse. Hens took after her as naturally as after the soaring beetle. Geese pursued her as if she were a fleeting tadpole. Ducks, turkeys, and guinea fowl camped upon her trail with tireless pertinacity. Now there was a leaven of improbability in this tale, and it leavened the whole lump. Ganders do not roost. There is not 1 in 100 of them that could sit on a fender long enough to say Jack Robinson. So as the Frau lived 1,000 years before the birth of common sense, say about a half a century ago, when everything uncommon had a smell of the supernatural, there was nothing for it but to consider her a witch. Had she been very feeble and withered, the people would have burned her out of hand, but they did not like to proceed to extremes without perfectly legal evidence. They were cautious, for they had made several mistakes recently. They had sentenced 2 or 3 females to the stake, and upon being stripped the limbs and bodies of these, had not redeemed the hideous promise of their shriveled faces and hands. Justice was ashamed of having toasted comparatively plump and presumably innocent women, and the punishment of this one was wisely postponed until the proof should be all in. But in the meantime, a graceless youth named Hans Blizzlewartle made the startling discovery that none of the fowls that pursued the Frau ever came back to boast of it. A brief martial career seemed to have weaned them from the arts of peace and the love of their kindred. Full of unutterable suspicion, Hans, one day, followed in the rear of an exciting race between the timorous dame and an avenging pullet. They were too rapid for him, but bursting suddenly in at the lady's door some 15 minutes afterward, he found her in the act of placing the plucked and eviscerated nemesis upon her cooking range. The Frau... Oh, crap. The Frau betrayed considerable confusion, and although the accusing Blizzlewartle could not but recognize in her act a certain poetic justice, he could not conceal from himself that there was something grossly selfish and sordid in it. He thought it was a good deal like bottling an annoying ghost and selling him for clarified moonlight, or like haltering a nightmare and putting her to the cart. When it transpired that the Frau ate her feathered persecutors, the patience of the villagers refused to honor the new demand upon it. She was at once arrested and charged with prostituting a noble superstition to a base, selfish end. We will pass over the trial. Suffice it, she was convicted. But even then, they had not the heart to burn a middle-aged woman with full rounded outlines as a witch, so they broke her upon the wheel as a thief. The reckless antipathy of the domestic fowls to this inoffensive lady remains to be explained. Having rejected her theory, I am bound in honor to set up one of my own. Happily, an inventory of her effects, now before me, furnishes a tolerably safe basis. Amongst the articles of personal property I note one long, thin, silken fishing line and hook. Now, if I were a barnyard fowl, say a goose, and a lady not a friend of mine were to pass me munching sweetmeats and were to drop a nice fat worm, passing on apparently unconscious of her loss, I think I should try to get away with that worm. And if, after swallowing it, I felt drawn towards the lady by a strong personal attachment, I suppose that I should yield if I could not help it. And then if the lady chose to run and I chose to follow, making a good deal of noise, I suppose it would look as if I were engaged in a very reprehensible pursuit, would it not? With the light I have, that is the way in which the case presents itself to my intelligence, though, of course, I may be wrong. And that was A Foul Witch by Ambrose Bierce. It's interesting. I like his stuff. I guess he was known for his surprise endings and shit. But I like his stories. They're definitely fun to read. So, hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Toodles.